Today we have a series of 5 scary, 100% true Skinwalker stories sent to us from our eyewitness sources. Also, remember, you can send me your stories at truehauntinglog@gmail.com so I can narrate them and you can listen to them too. Have you ever been somewhere you weren't supposed to be? An abandoned building, a restricted forest, a graveyard after dark. You feel the thrill of trespassing and the rush of adrenaline. But what if the rightful owners are still there? What if they aren't human? And what if they don't want you to leave? You are about to hear stories from people who walked into places where the veil is thin and barely made it back out. Welcome back to the True Haunting Log. Tonight, we are exploring the places we should fear. We have compiled 5 alleged eyewitness accounts of skinwalkers, Las Lechutzas, and creatures that hunt in packs. These stories will make you rethink every shadow in your room. Find a safe place, turn up the volume, and if you want to support the channel, please hit that like button. Now, let's begin. Story 1, Theater Creature from Texas. This story happened to me and a friend of mine back in our sophomore year of high school, which was 9 years ago. We lived in a small town in West Texas of about 1,500 people, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and secrets are hard to keep. The town used to have some small amenities like a rec center, an auto parts store, and a movie theater. All have now been shut down and are slowly falling apart, skeletons of a dying town. As kids, we would go into the old movie theater through either the door out back or the rooftop entrance from the ladder to the side. The back door went straight into a big room full of costumes that is behind the stage of the theater. Movies were played as well as acts that must have been done before I was born, knowing the theater was only open for a very short period after I had moved into town. I've never had any strange occurrences during the few times I'd been there until that day in particular. After that, I stopped going back to the theater entirely. My friend and I had gone through the rooftop entrance and made our way to the overhead balcony overlooking the stage and rows of chairs. The darkness inside was thick, smelling of mold and old velvet. The stairs were full from top to bottom of old glassware like cups and plates, left behind like a banquet interrupted. We used to take a box or two up to the top balcony and throw them across the theater, listening to them break. Crash, shatter, echo. Don't worry, this place had long been abandoned. No one was coming back for any of this stuff. The only light source in that place was whatever flashlights we had brought. Otherwise, it was pitch black in there. That day, as we threw the plate and cups across the theater, hearing them break and shatter, we had heard something else across the theater by the stage. Scuttle, scratch. Knowing it's a small town, we chalked it up to raccoons or a cat that may have made this place its home. So, we shone the light, but we didn't see anything out of the ordinary. We continued to throw the plates and we heard the noise again. This time it was a bit louder. It sounded like heavy wings dragging on the floorboards. We shined the light once more, scanning our way up to the stage, where we were mortified to see 3 strange creatures. Even now, I've got no explanation for what they were. In the face, they looked like human women. Pale, haggard faces with rough-looking hair down to their shoulders. They were crouched over on the stage, huddled together. But then I saw the wings protruding from their backs. Large, leathery wings folded tight. In the light, their skin was gray, like wet clay. Our flashlight beam gave us away immediately. They snapped their heads up. Their eyes reflected the light like mirrors. They started to scream this high-pitched squeal and proceeded to stand up, unfurling those massive wings. We immediately took off to the ladder, heading back up to the roof entrance, terrified they would take flight and chase us. We weren't followed, but it was enough to make me stay out of there to this day. Many people in our town claim to be followed at night by strange creatures called las lechuzas, or witchbirds, women who sold their souls to become owls. I've never seen the creatures again, and hope I never do. It doesn't make me fear cryptids. I just don't want to be put in that position of being outnumbered by something I couldn't explain, let alone could only see with a flashlight beam. Trapped in the dark with things that scream like women but fly like bats. Story 2. The Noise from Kelby L. This happened to me and my friend Corey. We both live in southern Ohio. We one day decided to go into the woods with a BB gun to try to shoot some stuff. We were just a couple of bored kids, 12 or 13 years old. We walked into the woods about half a mile or so, enjoying each other's company and joking around like friends do. At one point we stopped to take a break, sitting down on a big log. We were talking about video games, girls, and whatnot when we began to hear something walking around. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Heavy footsteps. We look around and see nothing there. But the walking kept on going until it stopped, like whatever was walking was surprised to see us. Which freaked us out because we couldn't see it or them. This wasn't autumn. There were no leaves or vegetation on anything, so we could see about 100 yards in any direction. Yet still, we could not see what was making the walking sound. It was invisible. I grabbed a stick and threw it just to make some noise to see what the thing would do. It hit the ground. Then, the thing began making these small, jumping sounds, like a squirrel or something, mocking the sound of the stick. Still, we couldn't see it. Right when we were about to ignore it or forget it, this ungodly roar, and I mean roar, came bellowing out at us. It was so loud and deep it rattled my chest. I could feel it deep within my bones. Like a lion standing right next to me. Each roar lasted a good few seconds. We jumped up immediately and began scanning the area, shaking like crazy but still not seeing anything. This creature kept coming though, roaring and roaring at us so loud and deep it felt like it was messing with my heartbeat. It sounded like it was 5 feet away. My friend and I looked at each other and ran. Whatever it was, I don't think a BB gun was going to do much to it. We ran all the way back half a mile to the safety of the electric fence. The entire time we could hear it following us. The roar grew louder, and the creature drew closer, shaking the ground. We never saw hide nor hair of it. Luckily, we made it home just fine. We talk about this crazy experience from time to time. We joke about one day going back in the woods with a lot more weapons and finding that creature that made the sound, but truthfully, I'm too scared to do that. I've only been in the woods maybe 2 or 3 times since then, and because of this experience, I always felt watched and creeped out. That's my story of the roaring thing that sounded like it was right in our face, yet could not be seen. Nowadays, I regret never looking up in the trees. That's the only place I didn't think to look. Maybe it was above us the whole time. Story 3. I was chased by a skinwalker from that one Texan. This happened when I was 12. My best friend and I had incredibly active imaginations, and the woods behind his house were the perfect playground. His family owned 3 acres of land in Decatur, Texas, and his house sat on the very front of their property. Their backyard had a creek and a deep drainage ditch running through it. Joe and I would play in the ditch, rain or shine, with his airsoft rifles, pretending to be soldiers. We would follow the creek back into their property, deep into the woods. Joe's parents never had an issue with this because we knew the woods like the back of our hands, and Joe had a walkie-talkie he used to talk to his parents. One summer day, I was having a sleepover at Joe's house, and we were planning on camping in the woods. We were super excited for the night because Joe's parents were letting us set up our tent across the creek back in the tree line. We had eaten dinner and got our tent set up and ready to go, but we still had a couple of hours left of sunlight. We planned on spending them all in the woods playing. Around 8:45 p.m., the sun began to set, and soon we were back at the property line. We decided to head back then. It usually took us about 15 minutes to walk back to the creek, but we took far longer than that because we had never been in the woods at night before. Before long, it was dark out, and we began to realize our mistake. We stumbled through the woods, tripping over tree roots, our airsoft rifles, and thorn bushes. We were about 100 yards from the tent and crossing the creek when we heard a sound. Snap. We stopped in the water, listening closely. The only sounds were crickets chirping, frogs croaking, and water trickling over stones. I suddenly realized I was shivering even though it was still 90 degrees out and incredibly humid. Something just felt off, and I couldn't put my finger on it. As Joe and I began walking towards the shore on the other side of the creek, we heard a scream. I started shivering again, and Joe stared at me. We knew what a bobcat's scream sounded like, but this sound was like nothing else we had ever heard before. It was both high-pitched and deep and throaty at the same time, like two voices screaming at once. But the worst part was that it was close, very close. Joe looked at me and said, "I'm scared. Let's run to the tent. I can see it over there." I nodded, and we started to sprint through the dark woods. As we were breaking through a bush, we heard something big splashing in the creek. Splash! And another blood-curdling scream cutting through the still night air. The sound startled me, and I lost my footing on a tree root. I crashed to the ground, smacking my shin on a rock. Joe kept running, not realizing that I'd fallen. I sat up and saw something that I'll never forget. A dog was looking at me through a bush. At first I thought it was a coyote, until I saw that its eyes were bright yellow and it was the size of a small horse. It was smiling at me. I began to crawl backwards, keeping eye contact with the beast the whole time. I stared into those bright, intelligent eyes, and I could tell that it was amused by my show of fear. I slowly stood up and kept backing away. After being absolutely terrified, the creature chuffed, turned around, and disappeared into the brush. I immediately turned and sprinted to the tent, scared to my very core. Joe and I sat in the tent and sobbed for close to an hour before working up the courage to run 50 yards up the hill to his house. I don't know how, but we fell asleep that night, and I remember getting up to get a glass of water and hearing that haunting scream again. Joe still lives in that house, and every once in a while, he hears strange sounds and sees strange things. A few months ago, he and his father found a dead buck in the creek. It had been shredded, and there's no way a cougar or coyote pack did it. The poor thing had been torn apart. The most disturbing part of the spectacle was that something had taken a massive bite out of the deer chest, devouring the heart. Every time I go back into those woods, I get chills, and Joe and I always triple-check that all the doors and windows are locked before going to sleep. That wasn't the last time I had a run-in with the Skinwalker, but I'll have to share that another time. I truly hope that you never have to experience what I did that night in the woods. Story 4. Backpacking in Wyoming from Alexandria. When I was around 23, my good friend and I went backpacking near the South Platte River in Wyoming. As most people know, the wilderness is no place for an inexperienced hiker like myself, so my friend came along armed with a handgun big enough to hurt any creepy people lurking in the wilderness or any random bears. So then, we hit some back roads and dirt trails. We ended up stopping at a camping spot that hunters would use. There were signs like meat poles and such. We park and look around for any old deer tracks, and we find tracks leading to a hollow just a few yards away. We give each other a glance and grab our bags for the walk ahead. Soon we find ourselves in the brush, and I'm worried about ticks when we hear howls. A woo. I glance up to notice a now very still friend. What's? Before I could say another word, the air around me was filled with this pungent smell of elk. To me, it was like heavy pee mixed with a sappy, muddy smell. Then the sounds around us erupted into a symphony of breaking trees, which nearly sounded like thunder. My friend suddenly pushes me into the brush. Get down. Apparently, we had unknowingly walked into a herd of elk. One of the elk, a female, came right at us. My friend fired his gun in a panic, missing the elk, but once it broke through the brush, the elk ran right past us. But there was something weirdly wrong with it. I'm not sure if my friend fainted or may have hit his head, but he was blacked out. I did my best to drag my unconscious friend up the hill to safety. On top of the hill, I got a good look at the elk down below. They were all standing motionless and staring at us through the trees. Silent sentinels. This was a bit unsettling. My friend woke up pretty quickly, especially after a splash of water I had. Are you all right? I couldn't take my eyes off the elk while I asked him this. I was afraid that if I did and I looked back, I wouldn't be able to see them anymore. Yeah. Wait. How? Where are we? Did you see that man? His voice stammered, and then his eyes looked toward the elk below. I looked at his face and then slowly back to the elk. They all seemed taller than normal, almost hidden in the trees. The air felt wrong too, sickly almost. You could smell rotten meat, and it made me yak from that pungent smell. I remembered that smell from before. We need to leave. His voice was short. I helped him up, and we headed out of the brush, but we stopped when we heard the pained huff of an elk behind us. My friend insisted that I do not turn around. Don't look back, he hissed. Instead, the two of us tried our best to run, but as we started to run, I grew curious. Too curious. And I turned around for a look. It was the same female. Her hair looked like it was all mangy, and her skin and fur seemed to be falling or melting off. There were holes in her ribs where you could see bones. It huffed again, but the huff sounded like a scream. I turned to take off running, but my friend was nowhere to be seen now. I broke through the brush and came down hard on my knees, having fallen to the ground. My eyes were burning in the back of my skull, but then I heard a voice coming from the direction of the elk. It sounded close, and I could smell that same rot coming from it. Child, don't fear. I didn't dare turn around. I did not want to know what was speaking those words. Alex, someone called out. I opened my eyes, and a truck flew in front of me. Soon after, another scream came from behind me. I turned to see the elk again, and behind it were red eyes in the bushes. The other supposed elk. I heard multiple voices from every direction, now all saying the same thing. Stay. Stay. The truck door opened suddenly. My friend grabbed me by the shoulder and basically threw me in the truck. We tore out of that place, but the images, the sounds we experienced there still haunt me very much. As much as they confuse me. Those red eyes, those horrible, tortured faces of the elk. Remember when my friend asked me if I saw that man? Well, I later figured out what he was talking about. After he saw the female elk coming at us, he apparently saw a tall, horrid-looking man. He said that his face was gruesome. Flesh from his face was falling off. Eyes were bulging out of their sockets. Eyes that looked to be dipped into a fiery red. And it turns out he had fainted after seeing the man. He blacked out and had dreams of these elk devouring me at the spot where I tripped, tearing me to shreds and then feasting on each other. He said he could hear a chant-like song. We still hike, and I do have my own gun now to protect me, but just in case, I've got some backup holy water if I can reach it in time. Story 5. Navajo Skinwalker in Colorado, submitted by a hunter. My story begins in Colorado. I was 14 years old at the time. My family was taking a trip to visit my grandmother who lives deep in the country. We were planning to stay over a few nights and enjoy the peace and quiet of the country. I've always been more of an indoorsy person, but I did love taking a nice hike through the woods from time to time. The highway drive was long and uneventful, but once we finally got there, I was super excited. After all, I had my own room in the beautiful cabin my grandmother lived in, with an amazing view of the lake and forest surrounding the property. I exchanged greetings with her, and after a few minutes of idle conversation, I headed to my room. I pulled out my laptop and began to get set up for a quality gaming session when I first heard the howling. It sounded like a wolf's cry, but slower, almost distorted. Like if you recorded the howl and played it back at half the speed and lowered the pitch. That's how it sounded. It was very creepy, but having little to no experience living in the country, I brushed it off, assuming it was some animal I wasn't accustomed to. Soon the sun began to set, and I was exhausted at the time, partly from the really long car ride. I began to get settled into bed, and despite the thick comforter, something didn't feel right. It's a feeling that's hard to describe, like something was misplaced or missing. I didn't know what it was, but again, I brushed it off, telling myself it was just weird to sleep in an unfamiliar place, and soon I drifted off to sleep. I woke up around 10, 0 inches the morning, feeling really well rested, and I looked through my window. I could see that it had gotten foggy, as there were billowing clouds of mist drifting through the trees outside, and it was raining too heavily. It was a bit difficult to see through the windows due to the excessive amount of water outside. I threw on some pajamas and went to grab some breakfast. When I walked into the kitchen, there was a note on the table. According to the note, my family left the house to grab some medication for my grandma and said that they'd be back in a couple of hours. So I settled with eating some frosted flakes. I was sitting on the comfortable couch directly under the living room window, watching the rain and fog roll in. Then again, I heard that eerie howl, the same howl from the night before. It was so slow and thick and deliberate. As that happened, I noticed a figure creep forward through the fog. Of course, foggy weather in the country can be extremely thick. I couldn't see anything over 5 feet from the window, and I could barely make it out, but it looked like a dog or almost a wolf. Anyway, the feeling that something was wrong, very, very wrong with this animal suddenly hit me. Slowly, as the form of this thing came through the fog, I realized why I was feeling that way. The creature was standing on its back legs. Its back legs? I thought I was shocked and confused. When I finally could think clearly, I looked at the creature in more detail. Its legs were twisted and bent in weird ways, almost like it was hit by a car. Of course, up here by the cabin, the closest road that's often used is a good mile away. As I looked on in horror, the creature spun around and, on its 2 hind legs, sprinted. In moments, it disappeared into the thick fog. As it turned around, though, I could see that it had no tail. Literally, no tail, like it was ripped off or never there. The moment I snapped myself out of that trance, I instantly ran back to my room, shutting and locking the door. I hopped on my laptop trying to Google and find out exactly what I saw. When my family finally got back around 3, I waited until my parents were out of the room to tell my grandma. My parents would never believe me anyway. She was part Native American, but not that she was Navajo. She told me what she believed I saw was a skinwalker. Supposedly, it's a shape-shifting spirit or witch that takes the form of animals in order to harm people. However, it can never perfectly replicate the animal it takes the form of. When we left 3 days later, I was happy to get out of those foggy woods. After researching the legend of the Skinwalker further, I honestly believe that that is what I saw. So, to all of those listening, be careful when you go deep into the countryside of Colorado. If I had met that creature outside of that cabin, I don't think I'd be here to share this story. The wilderness is vast and we have only explored a fraction of its secrets. If you have seen something that shouldn't be there, let us know. Send your story to truehuntinglog@gmail.com. If these stories kept you on edge, please like and subscribe to join us for the next descent into darkness. Until then, watch the trees.